Kyle, we've been on such a journey with Jimmy, haven't
We
we?
have. Yes,
It
indeed.
feels like we've really seen the scope of the man and his work. You know, we started in the sort of like the humble beginnings where he couldn't really like his label just disrespected him, didn't even release the album. You know, into him finding his muse and eventually his big break with Margaritaville. Into I think a fall from grace, a series of complicated decisions, and through it we got a lot of mediocre music, some bad music, some really great music actually. And
Surprisingly, yeah.
it really feels like now that we come to this album, it really feels like we've reached the mountaintop. We've really
We
gotten to the point where we can look back and really see the landscape laid out before us. And I think I can think of no better ending for this podcast, really.
we've had a really, really long
Yeah.
to get
Uh,
here, and it feels so satisfying to know that we're at the apex. We're at the end of it. We don't have to
we're
suffer
at the
anymore, right?
mountaintop. Listeners, this is the halfway mark of the podcast.
God damn it.
Wasting away again, away again. Wasting away again. And Margaritaville. It's my own damn fault.
Welcome to Dischoreography, Wasting Away 2026, everybody. I'm Kyle.
I'm Tom.
We are your hapless hosts and longtime sufferers of Jimmy Buffett. We have another half a year of doing this. This week, we're doing 72 Jimmy Buffett songs.
Yeah, we found an extra layer of hell beneath the one meant for traders, where instead of being chewed up in the jaws of Cerberus, I don't remember, except we've done this voluntarily, which somehow makes it feel worse. Folks, this week we are covering Jimmy's 1992 box set compilation, Boats, Beaches, Bars, and Ballads, which is 72 songs long. It's almost 5 hours of Jimmy. You know, for a compilation that is almost exclusively, like there's a good number of new tracks on this that we're going to discuss, but is mostly previously released works. There's actually a lot of interesting stuff to talk about with this compilation. But before we get into it, we should take a second to give ourselves a little bit of reprieve, to stave off the beast for a little. Kyle, what have you been listening to this week?
I've been listening to, and it's really unfortunate that it's come to the point that my listening habits every week have started to become like informed by what I hear when I first listen to the Jimmy Buffett album. There's a specific song we'll be covering that has kind of a doo-wop feel to it. So I went and listened to a bunch of old doo-wop, your Coasters, your Platters, all of that good stuff, the 5-set. And then off of that, and I really don't know why I decided to, I went to go listen to a lot of Huey Piano Smith. And I don't know how familiar you are with Huey Piano Smith.
Not at all.
Early R&B, jump blues, rock and roll kind of guy. I mean, the guy played piano for Little Richard on his first album.
Well, that sounds really enjoyable. Honestly.
Yeah, the dude was kick-ass. He's got, a great bunch of songs that really informed, like, early rock and roll. And he never really, Chuck Berry and Little Richard, they would get crossover hits. Huey Piano Smith never really did, except he kind of did in one of the great racial injustices of the 1950s, which is that he wrote and recorded a song, which I'm sure, in fact, I know Jimmy Buffett covers at one point. I believe there's a live album we will do in the 21st century where he covers this. The song Sea Cruise. Don't you want to go on a sea cruise? Ooh,
I think I've heard it before.
Yeah. He writes and records that song, and the producer notes that it's really got this, like, great Little Richard-esque, no shit, like the dude was involved with Little Richard, 5 years early when he was getting his start. Piano-based, like, rock and roll, boogie-woogie sound to it. And what he does is he takes the song, the recording, done by Huey Piano Smith and the Clowns, his band, and he rips out Huey's vocals, and he brings in a white artist named Frankie Ford, and he has him do the vocals over the recording. So Huey Piano Smith is playing the piano. The Clowns are playing the drums and the bass and all of that on the song. They overdub ship's bells and waves, which makes me feel like it must have been an influence on Jimmy, because this song comes out in 58, and it's a huge fucking hit. I don't know if Huey Piano Smith ends up actually seeing a lot of royalties from that. Just because of the way that, you know, the music industry worked in the late 50s for black artists. So yeah, one of the true great injustices of rock and roll music.
It does sound like even amongst, you know, there's a lot of racial injustice.
It's pretty egregious.
Black
Yeah.
artists in that time period. This sounds especially egregious, yeah. Even by those standards, which were already pretty bad. Sounds like you had a nice time listening, though.
Yeah, it's great. I think the first time I was really introduced to him is my dad was always a big Johnny Rivers fan. And Johnny Rivers had an international #1 hit with his cover of what is probably Huey Piano Smith's like signature song, which is "Rockin' Pneumonia and the Boogie Woogie Flu."
I know Rockin' Pneumonia very well. One of Eliza's bosses at the Seattle Public Library has a radio show named after that song.
Oh, fuck yeah.
He just plays like old Americana and stuff.
So between that and, you know, as I got older, as I got, you know, into high school and college, I got really into Dr. John being from New Orleans. He did a lot of covers of Huey Piano Smith songs, and I was like, wow, these songs are all written by Huey Piano Smith. Let me go listen to Huey Piano Smith. And that's how I ended up listening to the original recordings and hearing about that story, that tragic story that really should be more well known. He's one of those unsung heroes of the early rock and roll era, him and like Wynonie Harris. Sister Rosetta Tharpe has thankfully gotten like her dues recently. What have you been listening to?
Jimmy. You know, I spent a little bit of time listening to some extracurricular Jimmy this week. I wanted to go back and listen to some songs that I thought were absent from this album, but more importantly, I finally found time. I set aside an afternoon and I listened to Third World Child by Johnny Clegg and Savuka.
Oh, fuck yeah. And how was it?
This album, it's so good.
Yeah, I told you, man.
So good. So, like, just a number of things about it I thought were great. First of all, his version of Great Heart is much better than Jimmy's.
Easy bar to clear, though.
I feel like I was especially in a position to appreciate this, because we've been listening to a lot of, I think, what could charitably be described as world music on Jimmy's albums. Like,
largely, you know, in the vein of minstrelsy, or
Caribbean minstrelsy.
Or as what you might want to call like non-denominational tropics.
Exotica when we're being charitable, you know? But I thought that this album was killer. I really like I said, Great Heart's great. I really liked the tracks Asim Bananga, Ring on Her Finger, and Third World Child, the title track. This album's great. It's so good.
Again, you could make a killer playlist out of really good music that were introduced through the bad music Jimmy creates.
Yeah, we end up in positions to talk about a lot of good music on this podcast, which is really enjoyable, especially because a lot of the music that we actually have to listen to for the podcast is sometimes not.
I really do appreciate the fact that, like, one of the things I can take away from having done this podcast is I do get to talk about much more than just Jimmy Buffett's music in this podcast, and that is more than I thought I was going to talk about when we started this.
I think a lot about, like, when I suggested this segment at the start, and you didn't really seem to understand the idea I was going for. And I think that this segment is necessary on a number of levels. First of all, for mental health, right? Because for me, at least, it really drives me every week to find something to listen to that isn't recorded by Jimmy.
Yeah, which we don't always do.
We don't always do, but like it really makes me feel like I gotta find time to have something to talk about here, which is it's good for my brain, right? To be listening to other stuff. We also Eliza and I spent a nice evening last night. She put on the Magnetic Field's 69 love songs, and I was just reading out on our balcony.
That's nice.
It's a good album. But now of course we have to get into why it's great and necessary, which is because we have to talk about the music of Jimmy Buffett.
I get let me start by saying, in the context of this, this is a compilation album. This really isn't going to be relevant until next week when we're back into studio albums. But I get the feeling that we are unlikely to hear another album on the level of Florida's ever again, because it's becoming increasingly clear to us that, like, Jimmy sees the expansion of his appeal to non-Parrot Head audiences, as buoyed mainly by his other business ventures, the shop, the restaurant business, writing that is not songwriting, you know. He's using those as feeder avenues for like getting people sucked into becoming Parrot Heads. So he's putting more mainstream appeal efforts into those avenues rather than the songwriting themselves. Like the albums are just for Parrot Heads now.
Yeah, it really does feel like it's kind of at the point like right now. It's like, you know, this album comes out in '92. It's been 3 years since Jimmy last released a studio album, and it really is kind of feeling like Jimmy is starting to reckon with why is he recording studio albums? Like certainly he's realized he does not need to record studio albums at the pace he was recording them throughout the 1970s and 80s. He just doesn't, right? And like I suspect that like 89, I think, is when Songs You Know by Heart really takes off.
It's about 88, 89 where it finally hits platinum, and then within like 2 years it's going to go double platinum, and then just every like 2 or 3 years it's just going to keep getting another platinum.
I feel like that's really the story of why we have this gigantic compilation, because like Jimmy has realized that he has this absolutely massive fan base that is going to go to shows forever. That is going to feed into various businesses such as
because once a year the people in Cincinnati or Omaha or Portland can all go into, you know, an amphitheater or a stadium, and Jimmy's going to let them go on vacation.
Yeah, and it's like telling that like listeners, I'm holding in my hand here a very interesting thing, which was, you might remember a couple of weeks ago, listeners, I mentioned that for my birthday, my young sibling Cal gave me a physical copy of this box set. And it comes with this large book called the Parrot Head Handbook, which is like just very obviously a fan piece. You know, it has tons of pictures of Jimmy. It's got Jimmy talking about, you know, his seaplane and his boats, and about being by the ocean, stuff like pictures of Jimmy as a child, and it's amongst other children, you have to try to identify which one's Jimmy. But then just like a lot of stuff that's very clearly like fan content, you know, like here's Jimmy's 10 best cheeseburgers, here's Jimmy's recipe for the perfect margarita, stuff like that. Among the interesting things here is that he has the Hearty section, which is like 13 pages, that is all him writing a blurb about every song, all 72 songs that appear on this compilation album. And then the back end has a discography, which is pictures of all of his albums. And there's a couple of things that I think are interesting here. First of all, it includes Down to Earth and High Cumberland Jubilee, but it mistakenly lists High Cumberland Jubilee as having released in 1971.
Retroactive, huh?
Yeah, it includes Rancho Deluxe, which makes sense, and both You Had to Be There and Feeding Frenzy. But the thing that I want to say to you that I think is really interesting is that it has a different album cover for Feeding Frenzy.
Does it?
Yeah, so you remember last week we were talking about
a poorly photoshopped Jimmy.
Yeah, the poorly photoshopped Jimmy. I think it does show effectively why they chose the different one, because I think it looks pretty bad.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's not good. That's the cassette cover. I just looked it up on Discogs.
That's the cassette cover? That makes sense. Yeah, so it's an interesting relic, but it definitely, like, this whole thing, it has a section about the Coconut Telegraph, you know, like,
of course it does,
the newsletter. Yeah. But it's just like, it's very clear that like this is like a fan object, right? It's like, if Songs You Know by Heart is the thing that brings people in, like, this is not something that people are going to see this and they're going to go, I'm going to listen to that and get into Jimmy.
Yeah.
This is something that people see and they only buy if they're Parrot Heads, right? If they're like, oh, I want a collection of 72 songs by Jimmy Buffett.
So, you want to know what Jimmy's up to in 91 and 92?
I do want to know what he's been up to. He's been gone for a while. I'm wondering where he's up to.
So, the Coconut Telegraph ran an article in January of 91 titled, Jimmy Buffett Still Working, Still Not Happy with Industry. And I presume I don't presume, it tells you in the article, that directly he means music industry. And it starts with this little vignette of Jimmy cooking, like barbecuing at his place in Key West, and suggesting that what he'd like to do instead of record a new album is to go to the Federal Correctional Institute in Tallahassee and teach convicts creative writing. You know, nothing would make me more likely to commit crimes after prison than being forced into taking a writing class taught by Jimmy. But Good for him trying to do something rehabilitory with
Yeah,
the prison system.
like firstly, that's good to hear. Secondly, I am actually kind of curious about Jimmy's like writing career because like it feels to me like a lot of what we've described as Jimmy's like strengths as a songwriter are in like story and character work.
Yeah.
And like I'm wondering if because he's not doing that in the songs these days, I wonder if that's like the writing career, the books and the short stories and stuff are like sort of the creative outlet for that.
Well,
I
he's got two books that release, one in '92 and one in like 2004.
Yeah, I'm just saying I would not be shocked if those were readable.
Readable, maybe.
not
You know, I mean,
terrible.
the thing about his writing is that like there's already a barrier to entry for his fans since most of them probably don't know how to read. But
That's inflammatory. I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm going to say it's inflammatory.
it's the only way I can cope with this podcast anymore is to make fun of parrot heads. It's what we've been doing this entire time. Anyway, this article also mentions that like even though Jimmy's been on record for like 3 years straight saying he wants to retire from music entirely, it still mentions that he's actually still on the hook for 3 more albums with MCA. Like that's still part of his deal. And Jimmy, like, I mean, he definitely feels disconnected from what's on the charts. He says, "I cannot get into the mentality of what makes a record executive work because probably I'm old enough to be their father. That's my first problem." And Jimmy, that's definitely not your first problem.
I mean, 92. This issue of the Telegraph is from 1990.
91. First of all, Jimmy's like 46. Like he's really not old enough to be a record executive's father.
No, I mean, but 92 is going to be interesting because like in terms of the adult contemporary charts, the 90s are a very volatile time for the adult contemporary charts.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
yes,
Jimmy's
indeed.
the concept of Jimmy having to essentially compete for chart space with like Nirvana is
yeah, boy.
It's very
I don't
strange.
think, you know, I'll be very honest with you. I don't think grunge is the finishing blow to Jimmy that we're insinuating here. I just want everyone to know that Jimmy was
It's
definitely
definitely not Jimmy's
dead
career
and
was
gone
not
from the
killed by
charts
Nirvana.
already.
But like, yeah, Jimmy's career has been decoupled from chart success for like I would argue like almost 10 years by the time that this compilation comes out.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
So here's what the Coconut Telegraph reports in the same article. But the heart of his success is the music industry, which remains a mistress he can't seem to desert or satisfy. Is his public unhappiness the final SOS from a man whose career is becalmed? I was just blown away, said Paul Page, a Billboard magazine researcher who recently evaluated a Buffett sales history for a management firm. There's 11 singles on the Hot 100 singles chart between 1974 and 1981, plus 17 albums on the Billboard Pop albums charts since 1974. And that's it. So the music industry like understands, however, that Jimmy is still, quote unquote, a revenue producing act that doesn't lose money for promoters. He's constantly in the top 5 highest grossing acts in the US every single summer. The article goes on to state that Jimmy says he won't stop touring until they drag him off the stage, and by God does he do that, but says he's cutting back. He claims he'll do his 91 summer tour but won't tour at all in 92. He does indeed tour both years, 53 shows on the 91 Outpost Tour and 65 shows on the 92 Recession Recess Tour. So much for cutting back. He does not cut.
92.
He's not cutting back. In terms of touring personnel, he's adding some brass in 92, John Lovell on trumpet, Amy Lee and John Padilla on sax, as well as Nikki Yarling on violin. So Jimmy's got like 3 or 4 women in the band who aren't just reeferettes and actually like playing instruments. That's interesting.
That is interesting because like
he has a history of having women in the band not just be like backing vocalists.
Jimmy does have a progressive streak. It's just we haven't seen that in like 3 or 4 years. He kind of went on a weird misogynist bend on Hot Water.
Look, it's not going to stop anytime soon, unfortunately. Speaking of Reaganism, there are soldiers in Desert Storm writing into Coconut Telegraph about listening to Jimmy tapes on tour in the Middle East. And by God, if any of these bunkmates defected to Saddam Hussein's Ba'athist regime, I kind of understand it, because 110-degree weather plus Jimmy is a combo that would make anyone want to commit war crimes.
It's pretty brutal.
So the other thing that Jimmy and the Coconut Telegraph are up to is apparently they're early supporters of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. So from its founding in 1977, it had involved itself with direct action. That's why it split from Greenpeace. I mean, I assume you're familiar with Sea Shepherds, but for anyone who's not, this is an organization that Greenpeace, among multiple nations, commonly describe as eco-terrorists that like ram whale vessels, disrupt fishing fleets and such, like throw cans of butyric acid at fishers. But their PR campaigns up to the 1990s were always in the vein of like a Greenpeace-esque, like it's an ethical standpoint about whaling and sea hunting. And from the 1990s on, Sea Shepherds are just full on, just like they're threatening to hunt down and commandeer whaling vessels because they're like, maritime laws don't apply as far out into the ocean as you're whaling, so we could do whatever we want. Jimmy himself seems to like he's a supporter of Sea Shepherds. He never donates enough to get like a ship named after him. There are some famous like animal rights activists that do have vessels named after them. Steve Irwin, Martin Sheen, Brigitte Bardot, Bob Barker. All of them have Sea Shepherd ships named after them. Now, out of those four names I just mentioned, only one of them ever actively went on a campaign with the Sea Shepherds. Do you want to guess which one?
Bob Barker.
It was Brigitte Bardot, noted latent fascist Brigitte Bardot in 1977, like their first campaign.
That's it's pretty wild. It's also that like, listen, Jimmy. We have a lot of notes about Jimmy's like political stances in general, especially at this point. He's generally been pretty good environmentally.
Sea Shepherds is kind of consistent because they're not quite like Sea Shepherds hasn't really actually no okay I guess in 86 they blew up a couple boats in Iceland.
That's like not non-controversial, and like that level of violence is
but like
something
they're not gonna get in the spotlight. I think they sink a whaling vessel in like 94, and then after that, when they get whenever whale wars happened, like the 2010s, that's when they start getting a bunch of like controversies.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, so that's in the future, but it's like it is like, you know, methodology wise, I don't know if I agree with that. I agree with the principle of that. Like, ecologically, like Jimmy's on the right side of that one, at least.
Yeah. Jimmy makes a deal with MCA to start his sub-label, Margaritaville Records. He said, "I'm going to give it a shot. God help the world. Jimmy's in the music business." That's what he said. And I don't disagree. God help the world. Jimmy's in the music business.
Jimmy is far from the first artists to make the shift to being a record executive.
Yeah. His first release, well, he's not the record executive. He hires someone in-house from MCA to do the actual business aspect of it. As we know from previous business ventures, Jimmy's not good at the business side of things, but he's pretty good at deciding who should run the business side of things.
It's like the covers, right?
Yeah.
He's not always the best person to play a lot of those covers, but he has good taste in the songs he wants to play.
So, Margaritaville Records' first release is this album, the box set. Coconut Telegraph reported that it would contain, in addition to 72 tracks, a booklet of what they call copious amounts of Jimmy Buffett photos, articles, half-truths, and lies.
Yeah, I would describe that as such. Copious amount. It's only 63 pages.
So the main person involved the main coordinator of the project is Mike Utley. He's putting this together. So he's got creative control when it comes to the selection and the sequencing of songs. Coconut Telegraph says that Utley is making a quote-unquote high-fidelity compact disc. And it's like, those don't exist in 1992. They just don't.
Yeah, they don't.
One more thing in context, which I just wrote one sentence here. Jimmy has a second daughter in 1992, Sarah Delaney Buffett.
Indeed.
Congratulations.
Really quick, so listeners, let's talk about broad composition, and then we'll get into the new songs. So, Boats, Beaches, Bars, and Ballads is divided into 4 CDs, which are named Boats, Beaches, Bars, and Ballads as sort of broad themes. Generally speaking, I think the CDs stick on those themes. There's a couple that I feel are a little bit out of place, but each disc has 2 new songs that have not previously been released on a named Jimmy Buffett album before. So let's talk about those. The 2 that are on Boats are Take It Back and Love and Luck. Take It Back was recorded for the America's Cup Challenge,
87.
as sort of a like theme of like we're gonna take back the America's Cup from Australia. And Love and Luck was a song that was cut from Hot Water.
I figured it was
Beaches.
from Hot Water just from the music.
Beaches has the songs Money Back Guarantee and Christmas in the Caribbean. Money Back Guarantee is one of two songs on this compilation that were recorded during a recording session with the Neville Brothers on October 6th and 7th, 1983 for, I guess, no particular album in specific.
Yeah, that would not have been for Riddles, and that would have been after the release of One Particular Harbor.
So
potentially Jimmy just decided that he was going to go in a different direction for Riddles.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Christmas in the Caribbean is another song that has been actually previously released, but not by Jimmy. It was recorded for an MCA compilation Christmas album in 1985. On Bars, we have the two songs Elvis Imitators and Domino College. Elvis Imitators was a song that was cut from Somewhere Over China. Domino College is a song that was cut from Floridays, which I think are very interesting because I think neither of those songs would have fit on either of those albums. And then on the last album, Ballads, we have the song Everlasting Moon, which was cut from Feeding Frenzy. So this is a live track that was recorded for Feeding Frenzy. And then Middle of the Night, which is one of these songs that was recorded with the Neville Brothers on October 6th and 7th, 1983.
Okay, well, let's head into the first of these, Take It Back. It was a non-album single in 1987. The B-side was Floridays. We had mentioned this back on the Floridays album. It's written by Jimmy Buffett and his then drummer Matt Betton, who also wrote Everlasting Moon together. So it's possible Everlasting Moon dates from this period as well. Originally,
I could see that.
By the time that Feeding Frenzy happens, Betton's out of the band. So this was done for the America's Cup. I don't know how familiar you are with the America's Cup, but I have a little write-up.
It's a yacht race.
It is a yacht race. So it is, as it calls itself, the oldest continuously contested sporting event. With how often it used to be, like it's done like I think every 4 years now. But sometimes there'd be like 2 years in between. Sometimes there'd be 10 years in between. So I don't think it was, it wasn't standardized for a long time. So in 1983, the America's Cup was held in Newport, Rhode Island, and the Royal Perth Yacht Club's Australia 2 defeated the defending champion New York Yacht Club's Liberty 4 races to 3 to end the New York Yacht Club's 132-year streak. They had won the America's Cup since it was first raced in 1851. Now, to be fair, there were yacht races before that. They only started calling it the America's Cup when America won. For 132 years straight, they were like, it's the America's Cup because America's winning. So the next race is 87, and Australia is the defending champion. And it's literally just like there's like a real nationalist thing. Like this fits totally with the like Reaganite period of Jimmy, where he's just like, fuck these guys. We had it for 132 years. It's the America's Cup, and that's why it's called the America's Cup, by the way, is because we had it for so long.
It's nationalistic.
So it's just like, fuck you. It's the America's Cup. America should have it back. The insane thing is, of course, there's intranational like struggle to the way that the America's Cup is selected by this point is that it's run between two yachts. It's the defending champion and whoever wins this secondary tournament of yacht races to determine who's going to challenge the defending champion for the cup. And the New York Yacht Club does not win that. It's called the Louis Vuitton Cup or something because that's who sponsored it. New York Yacht Club does not win this. They're beaten by the San Diego Yacht Club. So it's actually a completely different yacht club in the United States who's going to be quote unquote taking it back, which I don't really think is taking it back.
Yeah, that's a little.
And they do, by the way. In 87, they win in a 4-0 sweep. San Diego does.
Jimmy writes this as sort of a theme for them, I guess.
Yeah, so the insane thing is that the way that the song is structured is meant to be like, Jimmy's talking about like, yeah, we're going to go over there and we're going to take it back. Like it's in the future. This song is released after the America's Cup was won back.
Okay, well, that's very strange then.
Yeah, the America's Cup 87 lasted from January 31st to February 4th, 1987, and the single was released in like mid to late February.
I do think the context makes this song worse because, like, on first listen before knowing it, I felt like this was the best of the new songs for this compilation.
I mean, musically, the first
I
like
think it's so
35
funny.
seconds of this song is a complete mess, and then after that, it evens out.
Yeah, it starts with like
An
like
accordion doing Yo-Ho, Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me, which is, by the way, just in case anyone knows, that's not like an actual sea shanty. That is literally just the theme song for the Disneyland ride that opened in the 60s. It didn't exist before then. And then the main instrumentation and then like steel drums all coming in. Horribly
Yeah.
layered. It makes me feel like Jimmy produced that just based on the quality of the intro's layering.
it was produced by Mike Utley.
Okay. The other thing is, this is the last thing that Jimmy releases with the mustache. Last piece of music Jimmy releases with the mustache.
This is the last mustache.
This is the last mustache.
Yeah, I can kind of see it. The only people credited on this recording are like obviously Jimmy's on it. Mike Utley produced it. There's only two musicians credited on this recording. It's Matt Benton as synthesizer programmer and Robert Greenidge on steel drums.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I just kind of like, I don't know, I kind of like Jimmy leaning into a more outlaw direction, even just a little bit. But
It's interesting. At the very end of the song, Jimmy actually like kind of holds a note like
Yeah, he does
in
it kinda
key
well.
for once.
Like, I think it's good on a curve, you know? But, like, one of the things is that pretty much all of these new songs for this compilation are pretty forgettable. And the ones that aren't forgettable are regularly kind of bad.
Right.
So,
Shall we move on?
yeah, sure. So the second new song is Love and Luck, off of, which is cut from Hot Water.
This was co-written with Jocelyn Berward and Jean-Claude Niemro, who I think are two New Orleans-based Creole musicians. You'd think there'd be some of that on this, but it's only got like maybe a little bit of like New Orleans jazz in the song.
Yeah, it's...
There's a lot of fucking cowbell on this too.
There sure is. What is there to say about Love and Luck? I think it kind of is bad.
He's speaking in Haitian Creole. Cole serre is Haitian Creole for tight fit.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yep. And
This song-
until I looked that up, I was like, this song is pretty unremarkable. It's still
I
kind
don't
of
like-
unremarkable.
The pre-chorus it is very unremarkable, but it's like the pre-chorus. I just want to read the pre-chorus really quick. It says, "Everybody needs a little good luck charm. A little gree keeps you safe from harm." I assume gree refers to ambergris.
No, the gris is like, that's an actual like Creole term for like a Creole talisman to ward off evil.
I see.
That is the actual like term.
It continues, "Rub yours on me and I'll rub mine on you. Luckiest couple on the avenue."
Yeah, there's some lines in this that are on the level as the Runway of Love line on Strange Bird.
It's
Jimmy really should not write songs that could be classed as like poorly written erotica.
yeah. This song is definitely that. It feels like it. This song feels like it would fit right in on Hot Water. That's not a good thing.
Yep, 100%. Shall we move on?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say about this.
Okay, we move on to disc 2, which with money back guarantee.
I didn't like this one either. I feel like the metaphor here is insane, right? Money Back Guarantee was one of these songs. It was produced by Mike Utley and Jimmy Buffett. I'm noticing right now that I have Genius.com up so I can read the lyrics, and it mistakenly lists the producers Jimmy Bowen.
Well, Jimmy Bowen would be the producer for Riddles in the Sand.
Yeah, but I guess it's like
So
around
it could
the
have
right
been,
time.
yeah, it could have been like early Riddles in the Sand sessions. Let me tell you why I don't think this song was released.
Yeah.
Okay, the song was recorded right after the release of One Particular Harbor, and I guess for the early sessions of Riddles in the Sand. The song is way too confident about a relationship than Jimmy is at all in this time period. Like, Jimmy's not at that point in his life. Jimmy's only going to want to write and record songs about like being pathetic.
This does not feel pathetic. It does feel confident. It's like, it's not. It really feels like Jimmy came up with the idea for this song watching late night television and getting some sort of infomercial.
That being said, musically it reminds me of like Meet Me in Memphis or I Love the Now. So like,
Yeah.
if you put this at the end of Floridays instead of You'll Never Work in This Business Again, it would be a monumentally better album. but that's an incredibly low bar.
I would definitely accept this over like a lot of Jimmy's absolute worst tracks, but I don't think it's very good. Like it beats like a Cheeseburger in Paradise, and that's about as good as I'm willing to go on it.
Look, it's not the worst song on this disc.
No, the worst song on this. Actually, I don't know that the worst song on this disc is the other new one on this disc. It might be.
Oh, who's the blonde
Beaches
strangers on this? No way. God.
It's got Knees in My Heart. Knees in My Heart's got to be the worst one on this. Knees in My Heart's
It's
so
got
bad.
Brown Eyed Girl. It's got so many bad songs.
Yeah, I think that
It's got like in and amongst all of these really bad songs, it's got When the Coast is Clear and I Have Found Me a Home.
So I mentioned I did this to you, listeners. I did this like complicated grading system where I gave every song on this compilation a numerical score and then did averages to see, first of all, how each of these discs stacks up, but secondly, how each album is represented on this. And maybe I'll get into that more later if it's interesting, but Beaches does score the lowest.
I can see that. Anyway, let's move on to an awful portent of the Santa-shaped things to come, Christmas in the Caribbean.
Yeah, so Christmas in the Caribbean was produced by Tony Brown, recorded April 22nd, 1985 for the MCA compilation album Tennessee Christmas.
So
I have the whole personnel list here.
of
which is
the
Timothy
entire
yeah,
of the song. Okay, yeah, give me the song.
Yeah, for the song. It's Timothy Schmidt on bass, Sam Clayton on congas, Vince Melamed on keyboards, Mike Utley on keyboards, Matt Betton on drums, Josh Leo on guitar, and Robert Greenidge on steel drums with backing vocals by Timothy Schmidt and Nicolette Larson. And obviously Jimmy's also there.
So on the Tennessee Christmas compilation album, these are all MCA Nashville-based artists. So let me read the track listing here, and let me see if you can pick out what stands out like a sore thumb here. You open with Reba McEntire doing "Away in a Manger," and then you have Steve Werner doing the title track "Tennessee Christmas," which he did write for the album, and then you've got John Schneider, "Please Come Home for Christmas," Nicolette Larson, "One Bright Star," Loretta Lynn, "The First Noel," Ray Stevens, "Greatest Little Christmas Ever Was," Brenda Lee, "The Christmas Song," Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, Jimmy Buffett, "Christmas in the Caribbean," the Oak Ridge Boys, "Christmas is Painting the Town," Barbara Mandrell, "Winter Wonderland." Do you see what sticks out like a sore thumb there?
It is Jimmy. It is Jimmy. It's that's just a really Okay, so it's 1985. 1985 is Riddles in the Sand is out. That's post Last Mango in Paris.
No, he's doing it for this album specifically. They asked him to write a song for this album. But yeah, around Last Mango in Paris.
Yeah, this is an insane song. I think this is. I don't think it's as bad as Knees of My Heart, but it's probably next. Pretty bad. It's got like it mentions that it's Jimmy's birthday on Christmas Day.
It's Mr. Buffett's birthday too, yeah.
Mr. Buffett's birthday too.
All they don't have is snow, or they got everything but snow. It's a
got,
bad reggae.
Like sleigh bells, like in the background, which does not fit with Jimmy's sound at all.
I just can't imagine like listening to like if you were listening through this album the first time and you're not paying attention to the track listing, and Brenda Lee is doing Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, and that ends, and then you get the beginning of this fucking song.
The less said about Christmas in the Caribbean, the better.
Well, folks, that means we're 2 discs down out of 4, so it's time to change out the CD. See you on side B of the podcast. Well, disc 3, Bars, which I looked at this. I think this is an okay track listing for this entire disc compared to some of the other ones.
I don't hate the Bars disc actually. Like
I would imagine that it probably
terrible shit on it.
Yeah, I would imagine it probably scores relatively high because some of these are. Let
me give you the score really quick. So I graded songs on a scale of 5 to -1.
Jesus, okay.
And the entire compilation in total scores 2.04.
Okay.
Average. Boats scored 2.05.
Wow, pretty
Beaches
close.
scored 1.38.
Yeah.
Bars scored 1.88. And
Really?
Ballads scored
Okay.
2.47.
Wow.
So,
Oh, yeah, okay. I guess ballads probably, that makes sense.
yeah, but so like Bars is not terrible. Bars is not terrible.
Yeah, it's not the worst.
I will say it's got the most like really good songs on it, I think.
It's
Because,
also
you know,
got some real
like,
shit that drags it down too, huh?
it's got some real shit. Got Live to See Saturday Night. You got to
Got
deal
Desperation
with
Samba, When Salome Plays
Why
the
Don't We Get Drunk
Drum.
is on this.
Yeah, okay.
But you know what? It
Let's.
also has They Don't Dance Like Carmen No More.
Yeah.
It has Tampico Trauma. It has Great Filling Station Holdup.
Oh,
Like,
it's got
pretty
First
enjoyable.
Look. Yeah. Kick It In Second
It's
Wind.
a pretty good disc, honestly. It's got a lot of shit on it, but it's a pretty good disc.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's also
so
got Elvis Imitators.
Elvis Imitators cut off of Somewhere Over China.
I don't think it was cut off of Somewhere Over China. It was specific. I don't know whether it actually was ever released as a single or abandoned as a single, but it was supposed to be a single credited to Freddie and the Fish Sticks.
Yeah.
The B-side to it being Elvis Imitators Part 2, which I can't find anywhere. I would assume it's probably just like an instrumental version of this song.
Yeah, I want to really quick, though, mention that I found this out while I was reading the little blurbs I was talking about earlier. This is not mentioned in the credits for this song at all, but the blurb says, this song was written by Steve Goodman and Michael Smith.
Yes, this is a Steve Goodman, Mike Smith song. Steve Goodman's version of this is pretty good.
Okay, I wasn't
but
sure.
But that's
if this
because
was
Steve can do like a convincing Elvis impression. Because this entire song is dependent on Jimmy being able to do a convincing Elvis imitation, and he cannot.
Yeah, I don't think it's like terrible musically, but I don't think Jimmy's Elvis imitation is very good.
The other thing is it has the Jordanaires on it.
It does. It sure does.
Like
have the
literally
Jordanaires on it.
Elvis's backing vocalists, and they are so far down in the mix. It's like a waste of the Jordanaires.
It's very strange. It's also one of like two of these songs that Jimmy is explicitly credited on. But yeah, it's really weird. It's also, I think, the only song in this compilation, the only new song, I should say, that was produced by Norbert Putnam.
Oh yeah, it would be.
Yeah, it would be, because this was recorded around the time
This
of
is
Somewhere Over China.
Yeah, the earliest out of all of them. Yeah, and I can't remember. I think it was either on Coconut Telegraph or Somewhere Over China that, like, in the last gasp of one of Jimmy's pseudonyms, one of them was called Freddie Buffett on one of those albums.
I think it was on Somewhere Over China, but I don't remember why.
And I feel like that's got to be, at least in part, some reference to Freddie and the Fish Sticks here. It's got to be related in some way.
Actually, there was Freddie Buffett, and then he did have like Freddie Fish Sticks somewhere on some crediting. I think that might have actually been on Last Mango in Paris.
So, folks, see if you can wrap your heads around this. The third disc closes out with a song no one's ever heard before because it's previously unreleased, which is the Jimmy Buffett, Dan Fogelberg collaboration, Domino College.
Cut from Floridays.
It seems to be, like, musically a rip-off of Bruce Springsteen's Pink Cadillac.
Yeah, so let me read the personnel for this. We've got sort of like the standard stuff for Floridays era Buffett, which is Matt Betton on drums, Willie Weeks on bass, Reggie Young on electric guitar, Josh Leo on electric guitar, Vince Mellowed on synthesizer, Mike Utley on piano, Jimmy's here on acoustic guitar, Daryl Leonard on trumpet, Joe Sublett on tenor sax, background vocals by Mary Harris and Bree Howard, and the horn. It says also horn groove masters. So the song that was cut off of Floridays is a song about a place I guess Jimmy found one time in the Caribbean, which is labeled Domino College, and it is just kind of blatantly a casino where people play dominoes.
Yeah, so
casino might be extravagant. It is a shack where people gamble on dominoes. I have the blurb here. It doesn't say exactly where, but it says Nevis, on the island of Nevis.
Yeah, Butlertown is like a little community on Nevis. And they're there, I guess, in the early 80s, I think, is the time frame when they're doing this. This led me to be thinking about the line in the song. I mean, I think this is a largely middle-of-the-road, forgettable Jimmy Buffett song. The line that stuck out to me since the first time I listened to it was the working vacation in the third world nation line, which I didn't like. The fact that they're on Nevis in the early 80s is like, oh boy, Jimmy, like we're already into like the stereotypical use of third world to mean poor developing nations. Listeners, if you're not aware, first, second, and third world are political classifications that came about in the 1950s to denote the first world being the U.S. and their allies, the second world being the USSR and their allies, and the third world being non-aligned nations. Now, there's a lot of fluidity to that. One of them is the fact that St. Kitts and Nevis at this time, at the time that Jimmy's there, is still part of the United Kingdom. It hasn't gained independence yet. And so, technically, it should be first world.
Would be the first world, yeah, but this is also around the period, like, I guess, like 1980s, where, like, a different sort of...
Oh, yeah, it's entirely tied to economics now. It's saying...
Yeah, there's a different understanding of third world that, especially like we have now, there's a misconception that it just means, like, second world does not really exist.
And that's why that, like, global economics has moved towards, like, the terms global north and global south to eliminate that third option in general.
I just want to read a little bit from this blurb. It says, on the way home we passed a roadside shed with a cold beer sign and the words Domino College painted on a piece of driftwood. I sat in for a few games and was given a quick education by the old men seated around the table. That night, as we lay at anchor into the cliffs below Brimstone Hill listening to the monkeys jabbering in the trees, we started this song. I have often thought I might like to go back to Domino College and get my master's degree.
Jimmy's never going to be able to do that now because he's dead.
He's dead. He can't go back and get his master's degree in dominoes.
There is, in 1995, he's going to undertake a tour called the Domino College Tour. This is the logo he uses for the tour.
I guess he really liked that concept.
I mean, he plays it in concert.
It's not like it's not like a great song, but it's like you said, it's kind of middle of the road. It's like really far from the worst stuff we've heard from Jimmy. I would even put it on the right side of fine. Like.
I mean, the only line I dislike is "Working Vacation, a Third World Nation."
Yeah, it's a bad line, but like the rest of the song is like not like the rest of the song's not like good. It's just like okay.
Yeah, Jimmy has millions of songs that would be fine if not for like a core clunky line.
Yeah, and like this was recorded for Floridays. If this was the last song on Floridays over,
oh man.
That would be Jimmy's best album. Like, really
could you imagine? Oh, okay, all right. Look, let's
madness lies.
Let's move on.
Yeah, so we're gonna move on to the two new songs off of
disc
the last
4,
disc,
Ballads,
which is for sure what these two are.
Yeah, the first of these is Everlasting Moon, which is a song that it's written by Jimmy Buffett and Matt Betton, which is the same songwriting team that did Take It Back. I gotta feel like it must have been done around that time. But this is a live recording.
Feeding Frenzy.
From one of the concerts from Feeding that was recorded for Feeding Frenzy. In the set list, this would have gone where Honeydew is on the album. So I think it would
probably would be.
I think it would be much better to have this one rather than Honeydew.
I think so. Really quick, I just want to point out that it says on the blurb for this that you have never heard this before unless you were at the live shows in Atlanta or Cincinnati in the summer of 1990. Because I guess that Jimmy didn't like it that much.
Yeah,
because he didn't record a different version of it.
I guess.
I don't know. This song is so utterly forgettable for me. I think that this is like maybe AHAG for me if like we're gonna put an AHAG on one of these songs.
If we're gonna put an AHAG on one of these songs, yeah, I guess I would say probably this one. That being said, because it's so utterly forgettable, I would much rather have it on Feeding Frenzy. Because this song would come between One Particular Harbor and Cheeseburger in Paradise. Don't you want that bit of breathing room?
Yeah, that would be much better. That would be a better version of Feeding Frenzy. Yeah. I still think that album would not be very good.
Oh, yeah. You would have been extremely welcome on Feeding Frenzy and not most of Jimmy's albums.
So, I don't have anything else to say about this. It's very forgettable.
Nope, let's move on. Middle of the Night.
Yeah, so we move from this to Middle of the Night, which is the last new song on this this compilation. This song, I think, is interesting because it has like very prominent background vocals.
Yeah, it's like I said at the top of the podcast, it reminded me a lot of doo-wop. Especially like there's a high falsetto that almost reminds me exactly of some of the vocals on the Diamonds' Little Darlin'.
Yeah, this is one of those songs that was recorded with the Neville brothers, sort of in the period in between One Particular Harbor and Riddles in the Sand, that obviously did not make it onto Riddles in the Sand. I don't really know if I have that much to say about this, other than I kind of like it, you know?
Yeah, I kind of like it, but I also don't have much to say about it.
Yeah, just like not very interesting, but pretty enjoyable musically. That's really all I've got for it. The blurb on it talks a lot about Jimmy in New Orleans. Blurb on this reads, back in prehistoric times, the 60s, when I was working on Bourbon Street, I used to go to the Ivanhoe Piano Bar on my break and listen to a couple of local singers called the Neville Brothers. Needless to say, we all made it off Bourbon Street and on to better things, but I still don't think there are too many bands around today who can compare to Art, Cyril, Charlie, and Aaron when they harmonize. It was a thrill to work with them on this song, which was one of 3 that I wrote with Art, Will Jennings, and Mike Utley one summer in New Orleans. The other 2 songs eventually made it onto Neville albums. There's a typo here where it says they other 2 songs, but this one did not. It was inspired by late night television ads in the St. Charles Avenue streetcar in New Orleans.
Yes, there is a secret third, Jimmy's. I think it's called like Key to the World or something like that.
I do not know. It does not mention it in this extensive book.
Uptown, Midnight Key. I don't think Jimmy ever records it. It's on Uptown by the Neville Brothers, which is the same album that has Money Back Guarantee. Which, by the way, on that album, Money Back Guarantee is subtitled "My Love Is Guaranteed," which
it's kind of a better notion,
I guess. Yeah. Do you have a breakdown of like which albums are the most represented?
I do, in fact.
Okay,
really
hit
quick,
me with that.
Let me read through the whole list for
you
this
don't
entire
read through the
thing.
whole thing?
Yeah, just really quick.
Oh, jeez. Okay. I'm
okay,
gonna time
so-
you. Ready,
All right,
go.
Disc 1, Boats. Son of a sailor, Havana daydreamin', manana, treat her like a lady, steamer, jolly bon sing, nautical wheelers, take it back, on a slow boat to China, changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes, love and luck, the captain and the kid, trying to reason with hurricane season, boat drinks, one particular harbor, a pirate looks at 40, and lovely cruise, 17 songs. Beaches starts with Margaritaville, then goes into grapefruit, juicy fruit, ragtop day, Frank and Lola, tin cup chalice, knees of my heart, money back guarantee, when the coast is clear, Biloxi, distantly in love, coconut telegraph, stars in the water, who's the blonde stranger, I have found me a home, Christmas in the Caribbean, volcano, brown-eyed girl, cheeseburger in paradise, 18 songs. Bars starts on Fins, goes the weather is here, wish you were beautiful, Tampico trauma, Livingston Saturday night, Cuban crime of passion, first look, the wino and I know, the great filling station hold up, why don't we get drunk, Elvis imitators, pencil thin mustache, kick it in, second wind, desperation samba, Halloween in Tijuana, when Salome plays the drums, they don't dance like Carmen no more, the Pascagoula run, sending the old man home, and Domino College, 18 songs. Ballads has the most at 19 songs. It starts with Come Monday, then goes into Defying Gravity, Survive, Incommunicado, I Heard I Was in Town, Ballad of Spider John, Little Miss Magic, California Promises, If the Phone Doesn't Ring, It's Me, African Friend, Everlasting Moon, Pre, Middle of the Night, Coast of Marseille, Island, He Went to Paris, Stars Fell in Alabama, Changing Channels, and 12-Volt Man.
72 seconds. 1 second per song. Exactly.
When we talk about, first of all, it should be noted that in terms of like the most represented thing, it technically is the compilation, I guess, because there are 8 new songs, which is more than any one album has. Next highest is White Sport Coat and a Pink Crustacean, which has 7.
Wow.
There are 7 songs off of White Sport Coat on this. There are 4 albums tied for second place. Those 4 albums are Son of a Sailor, Volcano, Coconut Telegraph, and One Particular Harbor, from which we have 6 songs each. Next, we have 5 tied for third, that each have 4 songs on them. Those 4 are Living and Dying in 3/4 Time, A1A, Havana Daydreamin', and Somewhere Over China, and Last Mango in Paris, so 5. I can't read. There is 1 album that has 3 songs off of it, which is Riddles in the Sand. There are 2 albums that have 2 songs from them, which are Floridays and Off to See the Lizard. And we have 1 song from Hot Water, which I think is objectively correct.
And it's also like the best song on the album, which is also still not just that great of a song. It's Pre You, yeah.
Yeah, it's Pre You. I do think that's the best song on Hot Water. If you're going to have any song of Hot Water, I think that's the correct one.
Yeah.
So we've got this whole situation. Like I said, I did like this thing where I gave each song like a grade between these numbers.
I just want to know what was graded -1. And did you
remember.
know you were going to be doing negative numbers, or did you just like did you back yourself into a corner and I was like, if I'm giving this a 0, this needs to be -1?
Well, I decided that I would write down like words and then I would translate that to numbers in my head. And those words were terrible, bad, not good, fine, good, great, top 10. And I thought that, well, terrible has to be like actively, like, I think about terrible in terms of like, why don't we get drunk and screw actively makes me mad, right? Like, not, but it doesn't like, it's not like,
It's not Jolly Bon Sing.
it's not Jolly Mon Sing, which is like literal like Caribbean minstrelsy.
Was it
As
was
you
that
say.
a negative one?
It was Jolly Mon
Yeah.
Sing was. Jolly Mon Sing was like a volcano, one particular harbor, stuff like that. But so like that's the kind of thing that I would put in the -1 column. Top 10 column, obviously, you'd put stuff like, Tampico trauma, Pirate looks at 40, I have found me at home, just like the really, really great shit.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that stuff. There's more technically songs that I put in the top 10 category than I put in the terrible category, which I'm pretty happy about.
Yeah, of course, because there's some kind of strange choices here. Because like you get like the Defying Gravity, which is like a forgettable choice. But then you also get like Ballad of Spider John, which is like that's a great
Kind of like
song. That's
it's an
like a
interesting
super
deep cut.
deep cut because it's overshadowed by God's Own Drunk, but
Yeah,
a really
like-
great song.
So really quick, I made a couple of lists of songs I think are interesting. First of all, there are 6 songs on this that we have given AHAG awards to. Those 6 songs being Defying Gravity, Biloxi, African Friend, Coconut Telegraph, When Salome Plays the Drums, and 12 Volt Man. But then I also just listed some things that I think, like, there's a number of, I think, notable absences from this. And, like, I have a lot of songs that I think are, like, songs I would have put on a compilation like this, but, like, more specifically, like, I think that there's, like, 6 songs that I would really imagine should be on this, and those are Death of an Unpopular Poet, God's Own Drunk, The Last Line, Where's the Party, Midnight, I'm Not Famous Yet, and Creola. I
Yeah,
think it's
Midnight and I'm
kinda
Not
sim-
Famous. Like I could see Creola because of time, right? You want to really
Yeah, but
stuff
Midnight,
these
I'm Not
albums, but
Famous
like
Yet is like, Where's the Parties feels like the stuff off of Somewhere Over China is like, obviously Parrot Heads kind of hate that shit. So like I kind of understand why that's not there.
yeah, I mean,
The
like we
last
got some of
line
the
is, like-
depressing stuff. We got Steamer on this.
Like the last line is like really enjoyable, and we have Coast of Marseille on this. I think there's space for the last line.
Yeah, 100%.
God's Own Drunk very reasonably could have been cut for length, and also because there might still be the looming legal trouble.
There's
I
never
could
going to be
see.
another release of God's Own Drunk, unfortunately, and I do think it's
Yeah.
all descended from that.
All of that in mind, I really am kind of scratching my head at the fact that Death of an Unpopular Poet isn't on this, because I think that song's unbelievable.
Especially for how many songs White Sport Coat has.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it could be on there, but anyway.
White Sport Coat is a really interesting thing because it's like it's very clear that Jimmy reveres that as being like in his mind his debut album. It's the most representative song on like Songs You Know by or album on like Songs You Know by Heart, and yet
and on
it's
this.
yeah it's the album that also like least informs the direction of his music.
Yeah, it's really it's strange. His relationship to it is strange. I've got a couple of other little breakdowns that I want to go through. First of all, scores. I mentioned that I gave things scores based on
Okay.
their average from the songs. Really quick, I want to note the highest scoring album is A1A, which scored an average of 4, which is much, much higher than anything else. The next highest is Florida Days, which
is it-
scored 3.5.
Is it only B-side on A1A?
I think all the songs on that are from A1A are on A1A's B side. Yeah, I think so.
Well,
'cause
that would explain it.
yeah, it really does bring A1A up quite a bit because A1A's B side is legitimately incredible.
Yeah, if you had a
Um,
presence to send you.
But the other ones that scored particularly high is Florida Days scores an average of 3.5 by my metric. White Sport Coat scored an average of 3.28. Obviously dragged down by like a God's Own, not God's Own Drunk, by like Why Don't We Get Drunk and Cuban Crime of Passion and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Otherwise it would probably be a lot higher. The other high ones are Havana Daydreamin', which scored 3.25, and Somewhere Over China, which scored 2.75. Those are like all
Yeah.
of the highest scoring albums. The worst scoring album from my metrics is Riddles in the Sand, which scored 0.66. And
Which
then
is
Last
an
Mango in
interesting one
Paris.
because like all of those high scoring ones, they are consistent with like what we've been ranking in the top percentage
Yeah.
of Jimmy's albums. Um, but the bottom one being Riddles in the Sand for being an album that is like most middle of the road forgettable Jimmy album so far.
Yeah, I mean the other things that are that low are like Last Mango in Paris, One Particular Harbor, Son of a Sailor, and Volcano. That all makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Hot Water, obviously, by only having one song and it being probably the best song on the album, kind of cheats the system a little bit. There's simply not a representative sample of like a lot of like the 80s Jimmy albums that are just kind of boring and forgettable.
Yeah. It's interesting. I noticed that on Bars. Obviously, I spent most of my time looking at the Bars disc.
The last little note that I want to make is that this is kind of going to stand in for Steel Drum Watch this week because I didn't want to do a Steel Drum Watch breakdown. So what I tried to do instead was that I tried to categorize the genre that I would put all 72 songs in, which I would list as 5 country songs, 2 exotica songs, 21 tropical rock songs, 25 Gulf and Western tracks, 4 country rock tracks, 5 Caribbean minstrelsy tracks. There's 5 tracks here that I apparently just listed as the genre bad. I don't remember doing that. 1 vacation pornography track, and then 5 that I did not really want to put in any other category. I don't think that actually adds up to 72, and I don't especially care.
Yeah, I
But
did do some boat drinks math this week myself. I didn't go tally it. The way I usually do it on the compilation albums is I tally up what's represented out of all the songs. Obviously, I wasn't going to do that for 72 songs.
It's just too much.
I did that for the Bars disc, 18 songs. First thing I noticed was, hey, what the fuck? Boat Drinks is on Boats, and it should be on Bars. But of course it's on Boats, because Boats in the title, despite the fact that there are no boats in that song, that song is set in a bar. They wouldn't be outside because it's 20 degrees out, and Jimmy is specifically asking the waitress for drinks.
So this isn't from the blurb about boat drinks. It's from an earlier section, which is an adaptation of a conversation Jimmy had with the outdoor writer Tim Cahill. But Jimmy says that that part in boat drinks about shooting the freezer, that's something he actually did, he says, at one point.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming his freezer's not outside on a boat, so...
No, this was not on a boat.
Yeah. All right. So let me take a run through through the Bars disc. So we get beer and a daiquiri on Weather Is Here, Wish You Were Beautiful. You got añejo tequila on Cuban Crime of Passion. Another beer on Great Filling Station Hold Up. Beer on Why Don't We Get Drunk. Hoodoo liqueur on First Look. Wine on The Wino and I Know. Champagne on When Salome Plays the Drum. And a final beer on Pascagoula Run. So the breakdown for the Bars album, alcohol-wise, is 4 beer, 2 wine, 1 cocktail, 1 tequila, 1 liqueur. And that's... I was like, okay, no whiskey, and there's no whiskey mention here. That's not representative of like the first era of Jimmy's discography. Wine is underrepresented here. Wine is running equal to beer at throughout most of Jimmy's career. And it up to 92 it is. But I don't think it's indicative. And then he's like, hold on, there's not a single rum mention on this disc, which is actually kind of wild. It doesn't map to Jimmy's career at all. But then I was guessing, like, if these songs are songs set at bars, right? He doesn't drink rum at the bar. He drinks rum on a boat. He drinks rum at the beach, right? So actually, beer being like above wine here also makes a little bit more sense because he's never really drinking wine in a bar. So, like, the main representative thing is there should at least be one whiskey mention, I feel like. I think it's also it's of course really telling that this disc specifically is very heavy on earlier songs. 1/3 of the disc, 6 songs on the disc, are White Sport Coat. White Sport Coat and Living and Dying, excuse me. And White Sport Coat is the only album that has multiple songs represented on this disc that also directly mention an alcoholic beverage. 11 out of 18 songs are from the 70s, and Weather Is Here, of course, comes from the Rum Run. Oh, so only 6 of those songs come from after like Jimmy's heavy alcohol period. It makes sense.
Do you think this is a good representation of Jimmy and his music? I mean, it's 72 songs. I feel like at that point he kind of gets into big numbers territory where it's like, it just kind of is because it has so much of his music.
Well, I mean, this is why I didn't try to do like a... This is why I felt like it was futile to do a Boat Drinks rundown for all 72 tracks. I was like, yeah, it's probably going to map out like maybe rum will be a little bit overrepresented and whiskey underrepresented, because that's just where Jimmy is and has been for the last 10 years. But ultimately, it's going to map pretty close because this is literally like, I don't know, what it probably like, I didn't do the math. This is probably like 2/3 of his discography right here.
Yeah, it's about that probably. And so it's
that being
really
said, you know,
quickly-
this thing it's overwhelming for anyone who's not a parrot head. This thing is for the parrot heads.
It sure is. I want to read really quickly a review of this compilation by Stephen Thomas Erlewine for AllMusic. It says, most listeners will be satisfied with the excellent Jimmy Buffett summary songs you know by heart, but anyone who wants to dig deeper should bypass the albums. In parentheses, he says, there are several that are first rate, yet many are spotty, and pick up the 4-disc 72-track box set, Boats, Beaches, Bars, and Ballads. Assembled thematically with each disc devoted to one of the words in the title, this rounds up not just every Buffett hit, but pretty much every one of his noteworthy album tracks, plus a couple of rarities and unreleased cuts. For some, this much Buffett may cause sunstroke, yet this proves that he had some fine moments that weren't singles, and even those that aren't parrot heads will be impressed by the consistency of his music. If you like Jimmy, he usually delivers what you like. I feel like that review is like, obviously maybe a little bit more positive than I would be about this, but I feel like largely speaking, that's about where I feel about this. Like, this is representative of Jimmy in broad strokes. There's some songs that I think ought to be on here, especially because there's a bunch of songs that I think are just completely forgettable that are on here. But it is representative of Jimmy, and I think that like ultimately for the purpose for which this compilation was made, it's probably about as good as it's gonna get.
When it comes to reviews, like I am fully of the mind that if you are a music reviewer, you should be able to separate, you know, the critic from the critique, right? Where you're not talking about like, is this specifically appealing to me, but is this a good album for his audience, right? Yep. That being said, Jimmy's already had his day in the sun, and people have been very lenient with him on reviews. I do feel like reviewers should be reviewers should be a little more critical of Jimmy at this point.
Probably a little bit. Like, it is like this situation where it's like
specifically because he's not trying to gain a bigger audience. He's just doing albums for fans, for parrot heads. And so it's okay to say this album is an album only for parrot heads. If you're not a parrot head, it's the worst goddamn thing you've ever heard.
I don't think this is necessarily the worst goddamn thing I've ever heard. Because,
maybe not this one specifically because it's a compilation, but
this really is. It is for parrot heads.
Like there is no reason to like there is no reason to massage Hot Water and say even if you're not a parrot head, you might find something. No, you're not. You're not.
You're not going to on Hot Water.
If you're not forcing yourself to listen to Jimmy Buffett, either because your life is empty or because your life is empty and also you're doing a podcast about Jimmy Buffett, you're not going to find anything on Hot Water.
Don't go listen to Hot Water.
Yeah, it's irresponsible for people to say that Hot Water might hold something positive for people who aren't strictly dedicated to Jimmy Buffett in their entire lives.
Yeah, I feel very similarly, like, but like this compilation specifically, it's like, it is like that from like a different perspective, because obviously this is not as bad as just Hot Water is.
No.
But it's also like, it's hard to like quantify the quality of this, but I think that like one of the things that I have to say in its favor is that it doesn't have most of Jimmy's, like, it doesn't have what I would consider Jimmy's absolute worst tracks on it, right? It doesn't have like a Morris's Nightmare or a girlfriend. You know, it does have Weather As Here, Wish You Were Beautiful, which is maybe one of the ones I would put down there.
It's
but
got
like,
Jolly Mon Sing, which is definitely one of those for me.
Jolly Mon Sing is down there for sure, but I don't think that like Morris's Nightmare and Girlfriend are on their own level.
Let me just say, it doesn't have 9 songs off of Hot Water. So
Yeah. It's so it's like this thing where it's like it doesn't have a lot of the worst ones and it's got most of the best ones, as well as like, you know, a pretty decent collection of Jimmy songs that are between fine and actually great. So it's like I think this is reasonable. I don't think if you're interested in getting deeper into Jimmy's discography, like this is necessarily a good way to do it, because it is just like maybe the format of the podcast will give this away. I'm more of an album listener myself.
same here. I think we'll have something to the thing is that's so hard to quantify is there's really nothing to compare this to yet.
Yeah.
We're going to have in the 21st century, there will be the Meet Me in Margaritaville compilation, which is 2 discs. So like 37 songs, like half the songs on this. But I think that'll be
More
a better opportunity for us to actually compare selection
Yeah.
to figure out whether it would be like a good pick. Because my belief right now, listeners, I very much could be proved wrong and probably will be, is that 37 songs by Jimmy Buffett is probably easier to digest than 72 songs by Jimmy Buffett if you wanted something more than just songs you know by heart.
And, you know, we'll get to it when we get to it. But, like, I think it'll be interesting to see how a different later compilation takes the sort of wide angle approach, like what songs they choose, how they choose to represent Jimmy. I think that this one is kind of interesting. It is mostly representative, but like there's notes that I think are like interesting. Like it has a lot less of like the country stuff that defined like especially like early Key West phase, you know?
Yep.
Like we talked about A1A. I think it's really notable actually that there's none of the A side on A1A. Even though the A side of A1A is like kind of forgettable and sometimes bad, a lot of that stuff is like music that Jimmy was recording regularly, like a lot of like country stuff. It's notable, for example, that there are of course 2 Jimmy Buffett albums that have no songs on this, unless you count Captain the Kid, and those are Down to Earth and High Cumberland, right? And like, yeah, those are forgettable. They're kind of from Jimmy's like original like earlier career, which he kind of has a
I do think that's a
relationship to.
rights issue still.
It definitely could be a rights issue. That's definitely the case. It's also a thing where it's like that is just a different Jimmy, right? Like,
yeah,
like even more so, I think, than like, you know, a Volcano is different from White Sport Coat. It's like that early like folk rock Jimmy is a very different kind of guy than the kind of Jimmy we deal with in like most of the 1970s and 80s.
There are vestiges of that early Jimmy on White Sport Coat, and they're frankly some of the worst parts of it. Like the social commentary parts of Cuban Crime of Passion and Railroad Lady, which are like at best forgettable and at worst actively hurting the album.
It kind of feels like we're getting close to like closing out. We should mention that the sequencing is kind of odd on this, but it's also like, how do you sequence 72 songs in an effective manner? I got no fucking clue how you do that. Each album opens on a song that I think is,
I mean, I'll tell you what I wouldn't
do.
I wouldn't do Steamer into Jolly Mon Sing.
Steamer into Jolly Mon Sing is insane. There's a number of things that are kind of crazy. Frank and Lola going into Tin Cup Chalice, going into Knees of My Heart is goddamn wild. Who's the Blonde Stranger into I Have Found Me a Home, into Christmas in the Caribbean. What are we doing?
Tampico Trauma to Livingston Saturday Night is just like, it's tragic for Livingston Saturday Night that they put it next to Tampico Trauma.
Yeah, it can't stand. It's like literally that's brutal.
If we thought Livingston Saturday Night sucked, it's the fact that it's next to Tampico Trauma, which is full on like a top 10 Jimmy Buffett song of all time.
Yeah, Salome plays the drum into They Don't Dance Like Carmen No More is kind of nuts. But I want to note like specifically like openers and closers for each disc. Boats opens on Son of a Sailor, which I think is totally reasonable, and closes on Lovely Cruise, which I think is utterly forgettable. I think that's an interesting choice, but opener makes sense, closer doesn't really. Beaches opens on Margaritaville, makes sense, closes on Cheeseburger, kind of the only closer that makes sense to me. Bars opens on Fins and closes on Domino College, which I think is really bold to close one of these discs on an unreleased track. Ballads is like, it opens on Kun Monday, totally makes sense, and closes on 12 Volt Man, which we talked a little bit about this.
Yep.
Yeah, 12 Volt Man is like very forgettable for us. It's one of Jimmy's favorite songs that he's ever written and recorded.
Jimmy
so like
constantly calls it his favorite song he's ever written. The Parrot Heads adulation all over the place with this song.
I think that really like kind of gets to the core of this and like how we think about it, right? Is like the sequencing's odd. A lot of the decisions that come into this, like obviously it's 70 true tracks. It's hard to quantify a collection of 72 tracks. It's for parrot heads, right? It's for fanatics who want to have 72 tracks of Jimmy they can toss on. Like it like I guess the modern day version of this is just you throw his entire discography into a playlist and hit shuffle.
Folks,
but
could
like,
you believe it? This was an album that was 264 minutes long. And next week,
like
for
4.5 hours.
Fruitcakes, it's also 264 minutes long, it feels like.
Don't say that.
Fruitcakes is 62 minutes long.
That's over an hour. That's too long. But that's what we're doing next week.
Yeah.
But you know what, Kyle? We're over halfway done with this fucking podcast.
We are. Oh my god, I cannot wait.
We're now on the right side of halfway through.
We will see you guys on the second half of the podcast. Fucking finally.
Yeah, next week on Fruitcakes.
Fruitcakes, 1994, July 3rd. It'll be the day before 4th of July. What could be more American than listening to Jimmy Buffett's Fruitcakes?
I think it's gonna do it for us this week for the podcast.
Yep. See y'all next week. For now, I've been Kyle.
I've been Tom.
Lay us out, Jimmy.
Wasting away again, away again. Wasting away again, away again. Wasting away again, away again. And Margarita the Bell. It's my own damn fault.